Nothing is tied to childhood quite like a clown, and no clown was ever more famous than Bozo. For many American families, Bozo was not just a children's show. It was the TV in the living room, the laughter after school, the audience full of kids, and the grand prize game every child wanted to play at least once. But behind all that white makeup, it was not all happy stories. There was war prisoners of war, Alzheimer's cancer cutbacks, and lives crushed by the very era that made them famous. One man who made children laugh had once been shot down over the skies of France. A magician who lived by memory, and his hands spent his final years fighting Alzheimer's. Today we are going to look back at 15 faces who once helped build the world of Bozo. You will still remember Bozo, but after this list, maybe you will never look at that laughter the same way again. Number 1, Bob Bell as Bozo. Let us start with Bob Bell, Chicago's Bozo, the man who made millions of kids laugh, while he himself had to get through brain surgery, old age, and a breakup that was not exactly easy. Bob Bell was born in 1922 in Flint, Michigan. When WGN put Bozo on the air in 1960, he was 38. He was not the first Bozo in American history, but for many families in Chicago and the Midwest, Bell was the Bozo who came to mind whenever they remembered that old TV in the living room. He played Bozo from 1960 to 1984. Bell did not have some glossy Hollywood biography. His father worked on the assembly line for General Motors. When he was young, Bell played baseball, but poor vision in his right eye narrowed his sports dream. During World War II, he tried to get into the Marines, even with his eye problem, was later medically discharged, then served in the Navy in the Pacific until 1946. Later, he married Carol and had 4 children. In 1968, Bell had to leave the show for brain aneurysm surgery. At one point, he could only appear by phone, then returned in 1969. For someone who lived off his voice, his timing, and his ability to keep the rhythm going in front of children, that was no small thing. By 1984, he was 62. The role of Bozo required running, falling slapstick, and staying steady under heavy makeup. His body could not carry that forever. Bob Bell died in 1997 of heart failure. He was 75. Chicago has a Bob Bell Day, and a stretch of road near WGN is named Bob Bell Way.
It's a chickadee! That's
Very worth hearing. A man who lived through war brain surgery 24 years in a clown suit and still had an entire city name a street after him when he was gone, that is already a very big life. Number 2, Joey Doria as Bozo. Now we move to the man who replaced Bob Bell, and honestly, that was not a job for the faint of heart. Joey Doria was born in 1952 in Tarrytown, New York. When he stepped into the role of Bozo in 1984, he was 32, and Bob Bell had just left after 24 years tied to the red nose. Before coming to WGN, Doria studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and worked in theater, stand-up comedy, television, and voice acting. He once got attention with the character Dr. Flame O on The Gong Show, a strange comedy bit involving candles and the song Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. The Bozo opportunity came in a pretty ordinary way. His wife Virginia saw the casting notice in the Christian Science Monitor, and Doria sent in a tape of his act. He played Bozo from 1984 to 2001, becoming the second and also the final Bozo of WGN Chicago. During that time, he was not only in front of the camera, but also wrote for The Bozo Show and Bozo Super Sunday Show. He won 5 Emmys, a number that says clearly this was not just some guy who got lucky putting on a clown suit. The heaviest thing for Doria was that the role stuck to his real life. Friends once recognized certain Bozo traits in the way he performed on stage. His own wife also said that over the years, the line between Joey and Bozo slowly blurred, and when he wanted to be seen as an actor after Bozo, casting people still often saw only a children's show host. In 2001, WGN ended Bozo. Doria called that kind of show a dinosaur, an old creature that could no longer survive among Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, and children's new viewing habits. He was not brought down by a scandal. He was standing there as a whole era of local children's television faded out. After that, Doria returned to Los Angeles, continued acting on stage, and doing voice work with projects like Tom and Jerry, Yokai Watch, BioShock, and Ratchet and Clank. This year, he is 74. He is still alive, still meets fans, and in 2024, he even returned to WGN Morning News to run the grand prize game for the first time since 2001. Number 3, Roy Brown as Cookie / Cookie the Cook. Now we come to Roy Brown, the man who entered Bozo from behind the scenes, then became Cookie, one of WGN's most beloved characters. Roy Brown was born in 1932 in Tucson, Arizona, but grew up around Chicago. When he created Cookie in 1968, he was 36. The interesting thing is that Brown did not begin as a star who wanted to stand in front of the camera. His mother was an artist. He studied at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, once wanted to become a cartoonist, then entered children's television with the hands of someone who knew how to draw, build visuals, and work puppets. Starting in 1952, Brown worked on Garfield, Goose and Friends as a puppeteer and art director. When the program moved to WGN in 1955, he followed. Before audiences knew him as Cookie, Brown had spent years behind the scenes creating characters, building props, and making art for children's shows that people in Chicago watched almost every day. Cookie was often the one being teased, hit with pies, splashed with water, tricked, and left outside the fun. But audiences loved him because of that. In 1987, as many as 10,000 people signed a petition for Cookie to lead the Grand March. That is the kind of affectionate money cannot buy. Brown won a Chicago/Midwest Emmy in 1992, entered the International Clown Hall of Fame in 1993, and was also inducted into the Silver Circle that same year. But in the early 90s, heart problems began pulling him away from the stage. He was absent for a long stretch during the 1991 to 1992 season, returned part-time, then continued having health problems in 1993. By 1994, he had to retire completely. When he retired, Brown said he was the luckiest man in the world because he got to do the work he loved. He still appeared in the anniversary special in 1996, then made one final appearance on the show in 2000. Roy Brown died in 2001 of congestive heart failure. He was 68. He left behind his wife, Mary Lou, 4 sons, his wife's family, and a Cookie costume preserved in the Bozo's circus collection. Number 4, Marshall Brodien as Wizzo the Wizard. Marshall Brodien was Wizzo the Wizard, the magician who enchanted Chicago children, but the story of his final years was much sadder than any of his TV magic tricks. Brodien was born in 1934 in Chicago. When Wizzo took shape on Bozo in the late 60s, he was about 34. He fell in love with magic at age 8 after watching a female magician perform at his school. His path was not glossy. He did not graduate high school, started working early at Magic Center in downtown Chicago, then worked as a sideshow barker at Riverview Park, the kind of job that forces a person to stop an audience using only his mouth, his hands, and stage nerves. In 1957, Brodien entered the Army and was placed in the Special Services Entertainment Division at Fort Carson, Colorado. Over 2 years, he performed more than 700 shows at hospitals, officers' clubs, and private parties. Before becoming Wizzo, he had already done magic stage, hypnosis nightclubs, county fairs, and trade shows. This was a self-made performer, not someone who just got lucky because of a strange costume. He appeared on Bozo starting in the early 60s as a guest magician, then became Wizzo the Wizard in the late 60s. Wizzo had the Stone of Zanzibar, the magic words "doody doody do," and more than 3,000 episodes of The Bozo Show. Outside WGN, Brodien also created TV magic cards and magic sets selling millions of products. A lot of American boys once held those cards and thought they could make magic happen in the living room too. In 1994, Mary Doyle Brodien met him while writing a Chicago Tribune piece about him called Vanishing Act. The two married the next year. Later, that article title became a sad coincidence. Alzheimer's began affecting Brodien's life around 2004, and he was reported to have been diagnosed around 2007. Mary cared for him at home for about 10 years before he spent nearly 5 years at Arden Courts of Geneva. In 2016, he also lost his daughter Christine to ovarian cancer. There is one detail I cannot forget. When the disease had become severe, Brodien once appeared in a WGN news segment with his son. Even though daily life had become very difficult, when he was given the cue, he still brought out the words, "duty, duty, do." Wizzo's reflex was still there. Geneva declared Marshall Brodien Day in 2018. He died in 2019 in Geneva. He was 84. Number 5, Ray Rayner as Oliver O. Oliver. Rayner's real name was Raymond M. Rayner, born in 1919 in Queens, New York. When he joined Bozo's circus in 1961, he was 42. He played Oliver O. Oliver, until 1971, a key supporting role in the early period, the kind of naive country guy who sang, traded lines with Bozo, and made the stage feel less stiff. But his life before that was anything but smooth. During World War II, Rayner served in the Army Air Forces as a navigator on a B-17 airplane. On April 3, 1943, his plane was shot down over France. He was captured and became a prisoner of war at Stalag Luft, the very prison camp connected to the famous escape, later made into the Great Escape. Rayner is also credited with helping prepare for the escape, but he was moved to another camp before it happened. What is worth saying is that inside the prison camp, Rayner began discovering his ability to entertain. He performed for Allied prisoners and even for German guards. And so, after the war, Rayner did radio, then television. He came to WGN in 1961, appearing on The Dick Tracy Show as Sergeant Pettibone, while also joining Bozo's circus. Rayner left WGN in 1980, went to Albuquerque in 1981 to work as a weatherman and host PM Magazine, then retired from television in 1989. His wife, Jean, died of lung cancer in 1995. After that, he lived in Florida, read books for the blind, took part in Grant a Wish for seriously ill children, and delivered Meals on Wheels. Ray Rayner died in 2004 from complications of pneumonia. He was 84. Number 6, Don Sandburg, as Sandy the Tramp. Don Sandburg barely said anything as Sandy, but in real life he was the writer-producer and the man who came up with the game Chicago remembered for decades. Sandburg was born in 1930 in Rocky River, Ohio. When Bozo's Circus premiered in 1961, he was 31. He played Sandy the Tramp until 1969, a silent clown influenced by Harpo Marx and silent comedy. Before WGN, Sandburg had worked in television from very early on. At 21, he started in Cincinnati as a prop manager, then became production supervisor for The Paul Dixon Show. After that, he worked with Wally Phillips and Bob Bell at WLW Radio and WLWT-TV. When Ward Quall went to WGN in Chicago, Sandburg followed that group there too. The important point is that Sandburg was not only standing in front of the camera, he was the producer, principal, sketch writer, and performer for Bozo's Circus. When WGN wanted him to write for the show, he asked to appear on air, then in exchange he would write more material. That was a very smart career move, and from there, Sandy was born. Sandburg wrote sketches with a vaudeville and burlesque flavor, the kind of old comedy that men who had seen it on stage would recognize right away. He also came up with the grand prize game, the game of throwing balls into buckets with magic arrows, Schwinn bicycles, and prizes that drove Chicago kids wild. For many people, that is the biggest Bozo memory of all. But the price of it was not small. Sandburg once said that after 7 years, 250 days a year, 4 sketches a day, and about 3 million words on paper, he was mentally exhausted. In 1969, at age 39, he left Bozo for California. Disney did not work out, then Fred Silverman helped him get into the Banana Splits. After that, he worked on New Zoo Review Star Trek animated series and Shields and Yarnell. In 1978, Sandburg moved to St. Croix and ran the Island Center Performing Arts Theater. He was also a skilled sailor, once took part in the Mackinac race and worked as a yacht broker in Florida and Marina del Rey. His wife, Gabrielle, died before him. Sandburg spent about the last 20 years of his life in Oregon and died in 2018 from complications of Alzheimer's. He was 87. Number 7, Ned Locke as Ringmaster Ned. Locke's real name was Norbert Locke, born in 1919 in Red Wing, Minnesota. When Bozo's Circus premiered in 1961, he was 42. He played Ringmaster Ned until 1976, standing between Bozo, the studio audience, the band, the circus acts, the games, and all the chaos a live show could throw at a host. Before Bozo, Locke already had a pretty full career. He got on the radio at age 9, performed on stage after high school, then worked as an announcer for WHO in Des Moines. He was also deeply connected to aviation, a pilot, a flight instructor, someone who once ran 2 airports in the Des Moines area, and spent 7 years as Iowa's director of aeronautics. His show, Uncle Ned's Squadron, did not just entertain children, it also taught them about airplanes. Locke gradually moved into children's television with Noontime Comics, Sunday Funnies, and Captain Hearts and His Pets. He also wrote more than 2,500 radio and television programs, including the teleplay Jet Pilot. In 1956, he went to WGN working as a weather forecaster on Lunchtime Little Theater and on Paddleboat, before putting on the Ringmaster outfit and stepping into Bozo's Circus. Early Bozo's Circus was not a small show. It had more than 200 studio audience members, a 13-person band, sketches, circus acts, games, and prizes. In 1976, Locke retired from television, though he later returned for Bozo's 25-year and 30-year anniversary specials. In real life, he survived 3 heart attacks. After leaving WGN, he moved to Kimberling City, Missouri, became chief of police, owned a real estate company, and then served as mayor until his death. Ned Locke died in 1992 of liver cancer. He was 72. If he were still alive this year, he would be 107. He left behind his wife Rose, 2 sons, grandchildren, and a Ringmaster Ned costume in the Museum of Broadcast Communications, No. 8, Bob Trendler as Mr. Bob and bandleader. Before children's television used canned background music, Bozo's Circus had Bob Trendler and a real band right there in the studio. Bob Trendler was born in 1912 in Cincinnati, Ohio. When Bozo's Circus premiered in 1961, he was 49. On the show, he was known as Mr. Bob, the conductor of Bozo's Big Top Band, the 13-person band that made Bozo's Circus feel bigger than an ordinary noon children's show. Music started very early for Trendler. He was an only child in a European immigrant family. His mother was the music director at WLW and an opera soprano. Trendler played piano from age 6, and when his mother toured Europe, he was already good enough to accompany her. By age 21, he was working as an accompanist and music arranger for WLW. Arranging took Trendler to New York, where he worked with big names like George Gershwin, Cab Calloway, and Duke Ellington. He also learned a lot about jazz from Eddie Duchin. Later, a job at the Century of Progress Exposition brought him to Chicago, and then he joined WGN Radio. By 1941, he was director of the WGN Dance Band and WGN Choral Director. In 1956, he became director of the WGN Orchestra. In real life, he met his wife, Annette, at the LaSalle Hotel in Chicago. She had been a member of the Three Graces, performing with Rudy Vallee. They had 2 sons and lived in Lake Forest with a vegetable garden of about 1.5 acres. Trendler liked photography, model railroad cycling, and once gave up speedboat racing after having children. He retired from WGN in 1975. Trendler and Annette moved to Florida. She died in 2002. He still took part in the Sarasota Broadcasting Club, and by 2010 he still had perfect attendance at meetings. Bob Trendler died in 2011 in Ellenton, Florida. He was 99, closing out a life that had truly been full. Number 9, Frazier Thomas as circus manager and himself. Frazier Thomas did not leave WGN with a farewell show. He had a stroke right at the studio in 1985, then died 2 days later. Thomas was born in 1918 in Rushville, Indiana. When he joined Bozo's Circus in 1976, he was 58, but he was not new to WGN. Before becoming Bozo's circus manager, he had already been a major face of Chicago children's television through Garfield Goose and Friends and Family Classics. He started performing magic at age 12. When he was young, Thomas wrote books about magic. Then from 1935 to 1940, he wrote a weekly newspaper column teaching children simple magic tricks. In 1936, he entered radio at WLW in Cincinnati. Later, he married Ann Deeds, a commercial artist at WLW-TV, and the 2 of them hosted Shoppers Special together. Garfield Goose came from one of Thomas's childhood memories of a goose puppet that nuns used to encourage children to donate. In 1951, he brought Garfield Goose to Chicago. From there, Garfield Goose and Friends became part of WGN childhood with characters like Romberg Rabbit, Macintosh Mouse, and Beauregard Burnside III. Thomas was not just standing in front of the camera. He created, hosted, wrote, and produced that show. He won a local Emmy for Male Best Children's Performer in 1958, then won again in 1964. In 1976, when Ned Locke retired, Thomas joined Bozo as circus manager. In the show's storyline, Garfield Goose bought Bozo's Circus and brought Thomas in to manage the circus. But Thomas was not a perfect fit for Bozo's slapstick pie-throwing and chaotic improvisation. He was a perfectionist, polite, and somewhat more formal than the rest of the stage. On April 1st, 1985, Thomas had a stroke in the hallway outside the office at WGN. The day before, he had still hosted a local Easter Seals telethon. He never woke up and died on April 3rd, 1985. He was 66. Number 10, Andy Mitran as Professor Andy. Andy Mitran was born in 1962 in Chicago. When he became Professor Andy in 1987, he was 25. He did not enter Bozo as an old-style clown, but as a music director, composer, producer, and multi-instrumentalist. He was also a 5-time Emmy-winning artist, so this was not some supporting face placed next to a keyboard just for fun. Mitran's private life has no scandal. What is worth saying is that he joined the show very young, but he came in at the hardest stage. In Bob Trendler's time, Bozo once had a 13-person band. Later, it had 3 people. By 1987, Professor Andy's synthesizer replaced the big top band entirely. Mitran inherited a legendary brand that was being forced to shrink because of budgets, cable TV, and new viewing habits. He stayed through the Bozo Show and the Bozo Super Sunday Show until 2001, when WGN ended Bozo after 40 years. After that, Mitran did not disappear. He kept making music for television with projects like The Oprah Winfrey Show, The Dr. Oz Show, and The Nate Berkus Show. He co-owned Mitran. Mitran Music created music and sound design for many Chicago brands, then co-founded Perfect Choice Music Library in 2010. This year, Andy Mitran is 64. He still works as a composer, producer, recording artist, consultant, and mentor. He also records with his wife Louise in the project Geese Louise. To me, Professor Andy is the man who kept the rhythm going for Bozo when the circus had already grown smaller, then kept moving forward through music. Number 11. Robin Urich as Rusty the Handyman. Robin Urich did not come to Bozo from shiny Hollywood. He came from clown college, improv, and classrooms where people still believed that clowning was a serious profession. Urich was born in 1953 in Berkeley, California. When he joined the Bozo Super Sunday Show in 1994, he was 41. He played Rusty the Handyman until 2001 during the final era of Bozo on WGN, when the show had moved to Sunday mornings and was no longer the big television circus it had been in Bob Bell's time. Before Bozo, Urich had a real clowning background. He had studied and taught at Ringling Brothers and Barnum, and Bailey Clown College, performed improv at the Comedy Store, and was a founding member of the Comedy Store Players with Robin Williams. In 1994, he moved to Chicago to join Bozo, not as a major star, but as someone who had been trained in clowning on real stages. After Bozo ended in 2001, Urich did not leave the profession. He joined Circus Sarasota, helped develop the education side of the Circus Arts Conservatory, taught physics and language arts through Circus Arts, then worked as a coach for Sailor Circus in Clowns and Characters. In 2016, he received the Nancy Rucher Arts Education Award. Urich's final years were not easy. In 2021, Joey Doria set up a GoFundMe for him after Urich went through cancer surgery, was furloughed from his job, and needed money for rent, food, and monthly bills. In the end, he closed out his life in 2022 after fighting cancer. He was 69. Number 12, Michele Gregory as Tunia. Michele Gregory stepped into Bozo when WGN's circus tent was no longer as wide as it used to be. She played Tunia on the Bozo Super Sunday Show from 1994 to 1998. This was not the era when Bob Bell, Ringmaster Ned, or Cookie still dominated Chicago children's television every day. This was the final stretch when Bozo had moved to Sunday mornings and was trying to survive high production costs, changing young audiences, and competition from children's cable channels. Tunia belonged to the new group of characters brought in alongside Rusty the Handyman and Pepper. Michele Gregory does not have much reliable public information about her private life, and she has no major confirmed scandal. So her story lies more in her professional position, an actor stepping into a famous brand right when that brand was being downsized. In 1997, the show had to keep adjusting to meet educational children's programming requirements. By 1998, Gregory left the cast after budget cuts. There is no big scandal here. Just a pretty cold truth: when a show gets old, the newer faces are often the first ones cut. After Bozo, Gregory kept acting with small television roles in projects like Will and Grace Strong Medicine, The Shield Go On, and Fresh Off the Boat. Her current professional page still describes her as a comedy actor. Number 13, Cathy Schenkelberg as Pepper. Cathy Schenkelberg was only on Bozo for a few years, but her life after Bozo was heavier than most supporting roles on this list. She played Pepper on the Bozo Super Sunday Show from 1994 to 1996. This was the late stage of WGN Bozo, when the show had moved to Sunday mornings and was no longer the daily television circus that had made Chicago memories. Pepper was not a major character like Bozo, Cookie, or Wizzo, but Cathy has a very memorable post-Bozo story. Before and around her Bozo years, Cathy was a real working performer. She sang in clubs on cruise ships, performed on stage in Chicago, and did impersonations of Dolly Parton, Madonna, and Marilyn Monroe. She also had a voiceover career, starting with Gerber Baby Food, then continuing with many national, regional, and local ad campaigns. Simply put, she did not live off one short Pepper role. She was a working professional moving from one stage to another. But the part of Cathy's life that gets talked about the most is Scientology. She is a former Scientologist and later turned that experience into the solo show Squeeze My Cans. Depending on the source, her time in Scientology is described as 18 years or more than 2 decades. The money she spent is also described as anywhere from close to $1 million to more than $1 million. She also talked about an audition that was later said to be connected to finding a girlfriend for Tom Cruise. The thing Cathy says hurts the most is not the money, but the time she lost. And I believe that sentence is heavier than any number. After leaving Scientology, she returned to the stage, took Squeeze My Cans on tour across the United States, Canada, Australia, Ireland, and Edinburgh, then developed the story into a documentary. Today, she is still an author, performer, voiceover artist, storyteller, and lives as a full-time RVR with her road dog, Dolly. Looking back at Bozo, I think what stays with us the longest is not just the red nose, the laughter in the studio, or the grand prize game we all wanted to play once in our lives. What truly lingers is that the childhood of so many Americans was built by people whose lives were not easy at all. Bob Bell went through war and brain surgery. Ray Rayner had been a prisoner of war. Marshall Brodien fought Alzheimer's. Roy Brown left the stage because his heart was getting weaker. And even the more supporting faces had years of budget cuts, illness loss, or having to rebuild their lives. When we were little, we only saw them being funny. When we grew up, we finally understood how much they had to carry to keep that smile on the screen. I love them because of the memories, but I respect them because of what they endured. And I am grateful because they gave us a truly warm piece of childhood. Who do you remember most from the Bozo cast? Share your memory below and subscribe to Weird Movie Secrets so we can reopen old stories we never really forgot.